Welcome to the WorkJoy Jam podcast. I'm your host, Beth Stallwood, founder of Create WorkJoy. In this episode, I am joined by Dr. Sam Mather, and we talk all around the subject of psychological safety, which I don't know about you, but I'm seeing everywhere at the moment. Lots of research going into this, including Sam's own research, and thinking about how can we help people to be themselves, to be and feel safe in their working environments in a world of change where some of the things that we used to hold us safe are no longer there, and with organisations changing at speed, with transformation, with things like remote working, some things that we all need to consider. And what Sam does in her research, and we talk through in this conversation, is to look at both the impact of the leader and the team, but also what we as individuals can bring to enhance our own levels of psychological safety as well. I really enjoyed this conversation. I hope you do too. I'll pop on at the end to give you some of my takeaways. Here it is. Welcome to the WorkJoy Jam. I am so excited today to be joined by Dr. Sam Mather. And I have known Sam for many years now. And Sam was actually the person who gave me my first ever job in learning and development. So I give Sam huge credit for taking a chance on me and for inspiring me to work in this world, and a massive part of my story as to how I am here doing everything WorkJoy now. But rather than me introduce Sam properly, I'm going to hand over to you. Tell us a little bit more about you, Sam, and how you got to where you are today.
Thank you, Beth. Thanks. Well, my background has been entirely in developing talent. And as we all do when we leave university, I kind of fell into it. But actually, I started at the bottom as a trainer, but progressed through the hierarchy, if you like, through using in large organizations across the world. So I've worked in Australia, I've worked in Africa, I've worked in America, and more recently in Europe, but with talent within organizations. So that what I'm doing is identifying, I've been designing and developing programs for talent, from high potential up to executive leadership programs, as well as the supporting mechanisms around that. So succession planning, competency frameworks, and anything really that allows people to be the best that they can. And to support that, I've done my own development. I'm a coach, I'm an applied neuroscientist, and a doctor in psychological safety. And that's what I continue to do, is to really support leaders to be the best leader they can be.
Amazing. It's a great background and experience you have. And I think so many people who are listening will be really interested in all of those things. And I think where your research has been into and what you've written a lot about in your books and your thinking around it and the topic, and it's coming up everywhere I'm working at the moment, I'm sure it is everywhere you are, this topic of psychological safety and its importance, but also thinking about how do we actually use that practically. So it seems to me to be one of the things that lots of people are talking about, lots of people want, but maybe not that everyone really knows some of the things about how you go about getting it. So what I'm wondering is, I know this is going to be really hard because you've written a massive thesis and books and everything about it, and I'm going to ask you to really simply explain it to me and to our audience. Can you give us the high level, let's understand what this concept really is?
The context of psychological safety. So you're right, it is receiving increasing attention now. COVID having been a catalyst for many things, but one of the things that we've noticed is the key thing which is differentiating a manager from a leader is a leader's ability to maintain individual performance in times of stress and crisis. And it's those leaders who are emotionally intelligent and are able to understand what the impact of the environment is on people.
Yeah.
And what was happening with during COVID in particular is we were no longer feeling psychologically safe. So what does that mean? Well, it goes back to a basic function of our brain. And the brain is incredibly complex. And I'm simplifying this really just for convenience and understanding.
Please do, so that my brain can understand it.
So
that us non-applied neuroscientists can get it.
Yeah. Okay. So we employ people because we employ them for the smart part of their brain, the part of the brain that is able to make decisions, to solve complex problems, to be creative, to be innovative, to bring together diverse information, and that's why we employ them. But there's also a part of our brain which, I mean, it's commonly known. People have heard it as the in books like the chimp paradox and the limbic system. But there's a part of our brain that is purely designed to protect us as a species.
Yeah.
And it's done really, really well. And therefore, because it ain't broke, it hasn't changed in 20,000 years. It's still looking out for the same threats to protect us against. And those are the threats that it's constantly scanning for. And there are 5 threats that we have wired into our brain. And those 5 threats, every single one of them were being stimulated by COVID. Every single threat that we are wired to look out for, we could see on a subconscious level. And in doing so, it increases your stress hormones. And as the stress hormones, like adrenaline and cortisol, rise, the neurotransmitters that fire when you're doing smart stuff, like decision making and problem solving, they reduce. So it's like a seesaw.
Yeah.
So the more stressed and the more threats you perceive that you're experiencing, the less able your brain is to deal with smart thinking. And we know this. Think about the last time you had a huge row with someone and you're in the throes of the row and it's all very emotive, and it's only half an hour later when you go, oh, and why didn't I say that?
Yeah. Why didn't I say that? Or what did I mean when I was doing that? Oh, why am I such an idiot?
Yeah, it's because if you like, your smart part of the brain is kind of like deprioritized, because your brain is saying you're under threat. Your ability to do quadratic equations is irrelevant now. All you need to be able to do now is yell, run away, fight, whatever.
And that's the state that, really interesting here, that the COVID situation has put everybody into, even if we haven't consciously kind of gone, this is what's happening.
Well, I think this is what's brought psychological safety to the fore. So the reason I was intrigued by psychological safety is it started from an organizational perspective, which was pre-COVID. In those days, BC, before COVID, organizations are striving to become increasingly agile.
Yeah.
And they're having to, because of the fast-moving environment that's sometimes called VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. So they put mechanisms in place within the organization to allow them to do that. Things like boundaryless organizations and matrix structures and remote working and follow the sun and all these kinds of things. But in doing so, I noticed that they were unwittingly creating an unsafe environment. So already I think that there are organizations that are, in an attempt to keep up with the world and wanting their employees to be smarter and more innovative, they're actually they're disabling that, if you like. And then layer COVID on top of that, where suddenly everything was even more uncertain and more volatile, and the threat was even greater, you can kind of get why people were finding it difficult to concentrate. They were finding it difficult to sleep. Sleep was a big problem for people. Being able to focus, all of those things are symptoms of feeling under threat.
And you said a little while ago that there are, I think it was 5 things. Can you tell us what those 5 things are?
So I call them the 5 C's of comfort. So the brain is looking for comfort in the following areas. So the brain is automatically wired to see anything. The first one's consistency.
Okay.
So anything that is not consistent or is out of the ordinary, the brain will assume is a threat. So for example, it's Friday afternoon. Imagine your boss comes to you and says, can I speak to you at 9:00, please, Monday morning? What is your limbic system telling you?
Probably, I've done something wrong. I'm going to get fired. I know that there's redundancies happening here. What have I possibly done wrong? And it's going to do that for me the entire weekend.
Whole weekend, yes.
Whole weekend.
Exactly. So, and it could be totally innocuous, but because that's out of the ordinary, our brains will assume it's a threat. And that's a safe thing to do. If you don't know what it is, assume it's a threat.
Yeah.
Okay. The other C is competency.
Yeah.
So at any point where we feel our competency is under threat, then we will have an emotional response to that. And the classic is getting feedback.
Yeah.
You know, we learn to manage it, but actually there's still an emotional response to feedback. And that is because the brain is going, if you're not competent, then that could be a threat. If you take it back to sort of like our cave times, if you couldn't hunt or gather, then you're in trouble.
Yeah.
So consistency, competency, control is the other one. So we love to be in control. And at any point where we don't feel that we're in control, that will be perceived as a threat. Okay. The other one is, the fourth one is cause. So, and it based on the assumption that we have a finite amount of energy and resources.
Okay.
So why am I investing my resources in this? I need to know why. Why am I doing that? It takes a lot to fuel this brain and fuel this body. If I don't understand why I'm doing something, then that could potentially be a threat. Okay. And the final one is connectedness. So we are herd animals, and we need to feel connected to other people, whether it's a team, whether it's in the family, whether it's a social group. So they're the 5 C's. And if you think about COVID, it kind of hit all of them.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know about you, Beth, but I've been in this room alone. I live alone with a cat. And so essentially, my connectedness was a struggle. My competence was a struggle because now I'm being asked to deliver a lecture via something called Zoom, which at the time put nothing but fear in me. I feel I had any control because I wasn't able to control when I could go out, where I could go, who I could see, what I could do. There was no consistency. We're wearing masks. We're not wearing masks. We're wearing masks on a Tuesday when the moon is high. So it was very inconsistent. And the cause, initially that I was okay with the cause. I could see the bigger picture, but that kind of dwindled after a while.
Yeah.
So all of those are being hit. And therefore, whether we know it or not, our brain is saying right now, you're living in an environment of threat. Your cortisol is high, your stress is high, eventually your resilience will start to drop, you'll struggle with your mental well-being, and then your boss comes along and then piles a whole load of more stuff on you.
Yeah. And one of the things that's really interesting when you're talking through it, the other thing that really came to mind is in organizations right now, change, well, even before COVID, but in the last 10 years, change is the constant thing that happens. So I imagine every time there's any kind of change program, I can see the same thing happening again. all 5 of those getting hit. It's like the reason why I'm doing my job has changed. And competency, I'm being asked to do something I've not done before because my job's changed. And so every time that kind of cycle happens, we need to be aware that this is what's happening in people's brains, right?
Yes, exactly. And time again, I see people present me with their change plan and I go, this is not a change plan, this is a project plan. Yeah. This is a list of tasks that need to be done. So by the end of the month, we will have gained buy-in. No, absolutely not. I think the process of change is around understanding people and bringing them with you. And yes, that may mean it's slower, but recognizing that the responses that people have are hardwired. Now, I'm not saying we're victims to our limbic system. Yeah. We can absolutely manage them, but the first stage of managing them is being aware of them and knowing how to respond. I mean, communications are classic in organizations. Organizational communication, we've decided we're doing some change because we are now maximizing our efficiencies. Well, how do most brains interpret that?
They're getting rid of people.
Yes, exactly.
Redundancy alarm is what's going on in my head.
So how it's communicated, and change is not an IT program or an IT implementation or a project plan. That is not change. That's a thing we have to do. Change is about managing people's state from one state to another in a way that keeps their smart brain online and their limbic system a little bit quieter than it would be normally.
Yeah. So we can't necessarily get rid of it completely. Its reactions are going to be there. I'm really interested now, if we're okay to dive into it a little bit, around, so this is a situation that many people will feel. I can totally relate to it. I imagine that our listeners there are going, yes, I know exactly what this feels like and I don't like it. And I wonder if we can approach this from 2 angles and maybe think about, so as an individual, if you're put in that position, which you will be, because most people have been in there at some point, if not many times, what can we do to help our limbic system? And then also maybe from the other angle is, if you are leading change, which so many people are, how can we be aware as leaders and be cognizant and able to do something with this information?
Well, this is really, it's a good question. So firstly, there are things you can do about it. You will never get rid of it, nor do you want to, because it keeps you alive. If I said to you, you can remove all fear in your life, and I will get rid of all fear, I think I would be dead within a month.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, cliff edge. Let's jump.
Yes. Ooh. Look. Let's jump off this bridge on a stringy piece of elastic. No, we need fear. Fear is your brain saying to any emotion is a message from the brain going, this is an approach or this is a potential avoid. That's all your brain is telling you.
Yeah.
So psychological safety, up until my research, had primarily been researched as a group construct, something that is a result of leaders and teams. Now, I had been mulling on that, thinking, well, this is great, but first of all, the things that used to create psychological safety, as I've alluded to, are no longer present. So we don't go at the same time to the same desk with the same team in the same building with the same leader. And all these little mechanisms that make you feel safe, they don't exist anymore. You go in, you don't know which desk you're going to be sat at, even if you have a desk. Your team might be all over the world. All of those things, they're not there anymore.
Yeah.
So how do we gain our psychological safety? And do I actually want to outsource my own psychological safety to an organization or somebody else?
Yeah.
So I researched it from the perspective of, is there a role of the individual in creating and maintaining their own psychological safety? And this is where the 2 books I wrote, they're like sister books. So the findings were that, yes, the leader and the organization are still the primary source of psychological safety. just over 60%, psychological safety, is as a result of external factors. Your leader, your team, reward and recognition policies, the organization, the standard stuff we know about.
Yeah.
But that leaves 40% that's actually in your own hands. And if you think about it, even if you were a leader who had created the nirvana of organizations, where it was the most perfect organization, would that guarantee that people would feel psychologically safe? No.
Because it's
Because
60%
we've got
maximum.
stuff in our head.
Yeah. I was just thinking there, even if they could create 100% of their bit, if that's 60%, you still haven't got the whole picture, have you?
No, absolutely. So the answer is, I mean, the purpose of me then taking the books, which is essentially my research taken from academic speak into our speak.
The human language.
Into human language, yes, and made much more entertaining than the academic. Is the book for the leaders is how do we create an environment in which employees feel safe enough to engage their smart part of their brain and keep the limbic part of the brain, the threat response, tempered. And I'm not saying it will go away, because it never will, but to reduce it. And I talk about leaders creating a safe environment, SAFE. So it's about story and communication and creating purpose and meaning and connecting with people at the emotional level. It's about, I mean, we hear a lot about boundaryless organizations. It's about creating an arena. The A is for arena. So the irony is, if you want people to be innovative and creative and think out of their box and come up with new ideas and solve problems in different ways, you actually need to provide a boundary.
Yeah.
So, and I describe this by going, so Beth, imagine if I put a scaffolder's plank on the floor and I said to you, I bet you your favorite tipple, like, you can't walk over that plank. Would you do it?
Yeah, of course I would.
Yeah. I now take said plank and I put it on the roofs of 2 10-story buildings and say, okay, Beth, now can you walk the plank?
Yeah, I mean, I would think about it. I wouldn't immediately say no, because I do like a challenge. Then I think I'd go, you don't have very good balance. This is not a very good idea.
So the ironic thing is, you know you can do it because you've done it on the floor.
Mm.
But there's additional risks. So assume that plank is, now you're in this metaphor for this crazy organization. You could probably cross that plank, but you'd be absolutely focused on where you're putting your feet and getting from one side to another and being very stressed about it. If I wanted to make that journey easier for you, I might put some scaffolding up. I might put a rope there and maybe a net underneath it. And, you know, you not only walk the plank there, but you'd be able to stop and admire the view, and your limbic system would be quiet. So it's about creating an arena in which your employees feel safe in which to work. And I'm not talking a physical arena. I'm talking about things like, and I know it sounds crazy, but being very clear about what the role is and where it starts and ends.
Yeah.
Who receives the output of your work? Where does it go? Boundaryless is another word for having no scaffolding on that plank.
Yeah. And actually, in many years of working with people, one of the things that stops talent being able to kind of really be brilliant at what they do is not understanding what they're supposed to be doing, having unclear objectives. You know, what you're talking about here is like the basics of really good leadership, isn't it? It's like, actually, let's get some structure here. Not so much that it's overwhelming, but enough that people are able to take all of their smart brain stuff and do something with it in a positive way.
Yeah. And for me, smart is only half the story. So smart goals appeal to the head. But
yeah.
if you want people to do something, you need to appeal to the heart and to the emotions, because they're far more powerful than the head. So if I said, oh, here my with an optimistic view, looking that I'm going on a holiday, hopefully in September, and I'm thinking, well, I should probably think about losing 5Ks if I'm going to get into that bikini. So I'm going to set myself a SMART goal: 5Ks, specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, time bound. Tick. I can tell you right now that I suspect that I'll be lying on that beach, and and there may well be very little difference. However, if somebody said, let's get married in September and have a big white wedding and a big frock, would I lose that weight? Damn right I would. Probably lose 10Ks.
Because there's a more emotional, bigger connection to the outcome. Yeah.
It's appealed to my emotion. So the books talk about setting goals that are not just smart, which are important, but setting goals that are meaningful, that connect with people's identity, with connect who they are, connect with their cause and their purpose, and really emotional connection, because that is what motivates people. It's not the commission that motivates people, it's what they're going to do with that commission.
Yeah.
Go on a holiday, take the kids away. That's the motivator, not the money.
And I think here, this is also where it kind of really deeply links into my theory of WorkJoy, is that if you actually really get the purpose and you kind of really connect with it, it's so much easier to find the joy in the hard work.
Absolutely. So that's the arena, the A piece. Then the F is flourish. So I talk a lot about growth mindset there, and enabling people to grow, and seeing how we need to invest in people's growth, whatever that means for them.
Yeah.
And the final one, which is toughest one to swallow actually, is ego light leadership.
I like that term.
So create an ego light ethos within the organization. So the challenge we have is the 5 C's that I talked about earlier. We all have them. We all have our fears, and it's absolutely natural. But we've been often brought up to hide those fears. And I've described a model whereby what we do is whenever we feel that any of those fears are about to be, so we're going to be attacked from a competence base, or we feel that we're losing control, the way we respond is we deploy our ego army. So we've built up an army around these, and the army has been trained on how to respond. So I was brought up in a very shouty family, and I learned that when I get shouted at or told that I'm stupid or I've done something wrong as a child, I taught my ego army to shout back.
Yeah.
Okay. So someone shouts at me or has a go at me, I shout. And I had to retrain this army that was protecting me to go, hey, army, you need to be a little bit less locked and loaded and more go on reconnaissance.
Yeah, find out more.
Yeah. Because if you've got a really strong army, all that does is make people feel really unsafe, because if it's about your ego and you being in control as a leader and you being seen to be the one who's got all the competence and knows it all, then all that does is actually create a lack of safety in others.
Yeah. And we've probably all got different reactions, haven't we, with our army? So some people might retreat. Some people, so many different ways of reacting.
Yes, the army either attacks, it does stand down on sometimes, it diverts, so it can, and it works both ways actually. It can divert a compliment, so someone throws a compliment into you, people go, oh, no, it was nothing, honestly, it wasn't anything. You're the arrow that's coming in, that's a compliment arrow, the army snapped it in half before it's even got to you.
Yeah.
As well as the other way around, where if you've received a criticism, So imagine that as an arrow coming in as a form of criticism. The army, in order to protect you, have tagged a little tag on that arrow which says, "Don't worry, the guy doesn't know what he's talking about anyway." Or he's an idiot. What would he know? So it's a very, very proficient army that we have built up over time, and it creates, and the common word for it is ego.
Yeah.
So we need an ego-light ethos in order to help create safety.
I love all those 4 things. I think it's a really lovely, easy way of thinking about it, to consider all of those different areas as leaders, as people who are responsible for other humans, and keeping them in a world where they can feel safe and do their best work and be the best that they can be at work. Especially thinking about that development, we didn't go into it in too much detail about the flourishing, is one thing I often find is that we forget in organizations that it's about the individual's development. And, we have programs to train you to do the stuff that we want you to be able to do. And sometimes we lose the fact that, hang on a minute, you're an individual human being and you might want development that isn't the same as what we think you should want. And how do we really connect with that and support it and enable people to grow in the way that's right for them?
Yep. And there's research to show that any development on anything can be beneficial holistically. So if there was an organization that allowed people to do any development they wanted, if you want to learn to bake cakes of an evening, we'll pay for that course, because you're learning skills and problem solving, and there are skills that you're learning which are transferable, and the broader and the more creative you are in your life, and the more experiences you've had in your life, the more ability you have to become creative and approach things from a different way. So all learning is beneficial.
Yeah.
So from a leader's perspective, that's what they can do. But individuals also have a role to help them become what I call sound. So we've got safe and sound. And the sound is, first of all, starting with the really basic stuff. And I'm sorry, but turns out our parents were right. We do need to sleep. We do need to eat our vegetables, all those kinds of things. So
who'd have thought that all these parents all these years were actually right?
I know. So when I teach the piece, the S for sound is sustainability. So, and I say, this is the boring part. I talk a little bit about the brain and how the brain operates at different brain waves, and five different brain waves. And it's like, if you go to the gym, you don't just work one piece of your body, because what would happen is you'd end up with a very fit part of the body and the rest would be out of balance. And it's a bit the same with the brain. We operate at 5 different frequencies, and each of them have a role to play. And it's really important that we connect with each of these frequencies, really just to keep the brain holistically fit, if you like. So the alpha frequency, for example, is what I call sloth mode. So you're conscious and you're doing something, but it's not taking a lot of effort. So I think of it like watching Coronation Street, or a movie, or reading a book, not like a non-fiction book, but an easy book to read. So you're doing stuff, it's a bit vegging out. That is as important as beta, which is concentrating, learning, solving problems. But if you just did one of those things for the whole day, you'd be exhausted. If you just, we've all known those days where we've done nothing all day but slob out, and then at the end of the day we thought, I don't know why I'm tired, I haven't done anything.
Yeah.
But you're tired because you've just been working one part of the brain, and we need to balance that. But then also, if you're wanting to do more advanced techniques on managing the 5 C's, you need to make sure that your brain has all the resources it needs. So, and it does go back to the boring stuff. So the neurons, the fuel that neurons use to fire is, wait for it, carbohydrates.
Bread is allowed in our lives for the power of our
Now
brains.
I'm about to qualify that. I'm saying that this is not a mandate to go and eat like loads of chips and crisps.
Shame.
Sorry, not the beige stuff. I'm talking more like the vegetables, the carbs you get from vegetables, wholemeal carbs.
Yeah.
The complex carbs. That is the fuel for your brain. So we need carbs, and the good carbs. So we need carbs. We need to drink, obviously, water, normal water, not sort of, you don't need any fancy water. Exercise. I've got some colleagues at the University of Reading who are doing a lot of research around how exercise helps rebuild the protective sheath of neurons, and thereby preventing dementia and Alzheimer's. And we're not quite sure how it works yet. We think it's to do with endorphins, but exercise is not just good for the heart, but it's good for the head as well. And then the importance of sleep and switching off. And the brain is actually very busy doing very important stuff when we sleep. And if you don't get your 8 hours, you may be very proud of the fact that you can survive on 5 hours a night, but not for long you won't.
No. Definitely not.
Because there's work that the brain is doing to store memories, to help with learning, to remove the toxin buildup that's happened because of all the neuronal firing during the day. All of those things are really important. So that is where you have to start, by looking after, and it's really boring. But if you don't get the basics right, doing the more advanced stuff on the sound model is going to be very, very difficult. And we know this because certainly I know when I have a food mood or I'm tired, there is no rationality about me, and I cannot manage my limbic system. When you're ill or you're tired or you're highly stressed, it's much more difficult. But if your brain is in good nick, in a good place, then you can manage that.
Yeah. And it's really interesting that this is the first one, because it's probably not the answer that most people are expecting. We say, how can we get psychologically safe? And you go, eat your veg, get some sleep, drink some water, do some exercise.
Start with the basics. I mean, once you've got them in place, then you can start doing the more advanced stuff. So, purpose, having what I've called an omni-purpose, an overriding purpose. Do you know what it is? And a lot of people attach their purpose to things which are going to disappear eventually. So I ask people what their purpose is and they give me their job title. No, that's not your life's purpose. Your job will contribute to your purpose. And although this is not popular, even your kids that are only with you for a short period of time, they're going to leave home. And when they leave home, what is your purpose then? Your kids, your job, your hobbies, your activities contribute to that. And if you can have an unwavering purpose that is the constant horizon, it doesn't matter if your job changes, if your kids leave home, if you have to move house, if whatever happens, that horizon remains the same because it's your overriding purpose. So mine is to support others to learn and grow.
Yeah.
So during COVID, there was a moment where I thought I was going to have to work in the supermarket, but that's okay as long as I'm helping others learn and grow. As part of that, then at least I'm contributing to my purpose, and it's not such a terrible thing to do, you know?
Yeah, and I love that it's bigger than all of these things that are movable. I imagine that if you can make that happen for yourself, it's massively grounding and helpful in times of need.
Yes, it absolutely does. It's not an easy process. I put some in the book. I put some tools and some little questionnaires and toolkits not to come up with the answer, but to start you thinking about it. Because it's taken me a long time to realize, you know, why am I here? What is this all about? What is the common thread that drives me? And I think once you recognize that, also helps making decisions a lot easier, because it's like, how does this align with my purpose? Does it help me move forward towards it or away from it?
Yeah.
And again, it's just like that constant horizon that's steady and there the whole time that you head towards.
Yeah, love it.
Yeah.
It's hard though, right? I totally get that. I work with a lot of people, and finding that is it's not an instant, I just know exactly what it is. There's some discovery to do, isn't there?
There is, and there are lots of tools that you can have a look at, and some will work for some and some won't, but they're there to start thinking about it. So you've got your omnipurpose, and having established that, we need to then start making sure that you have a useful narrative. That's the U in the end of the sound. Useful narrative. So although there is speculation in the literature about this, it's generally thought or believed that we have a limited amount of cognitive resource in our heads. We've got a limited amount of stuff that we can deal with at any one time, and we kind of instinctively know that.
Yeah.
We've been there where it's like, if one more thing comes across my desk, I'm about to explode. So we have, if you imagine a finite amount, there's a pie. And if we want our brains to operate productively, we need to make sure that the stuff going into it is stuff that keeps the limbic system quiet, thereby enabling our smart brain to operate. So we have built up over time a whole load of narratives about who we are, what we're capable of, what we're not capable of. But here's the thing. A lot of them were formed before we were like 10. So we have the most neurons in our brain at the age of 2.
Wow.
And from the age of 2, those that don't get used start to disappear. And, it's a sad state of affairs that we're on the downhill from the age of 2. But our beliefs and narratives are formed very, very young. And unless we are quite self-aware, and unless we're skilled at coaching and reflection and questioning ourselves, a lot of people just assume that's what it is. And I'll give you a great example, which I remember I was made to stand up in my math class at the age of 11. And I remember this teacher like it was yesterday, where he said in front of the entire class, "You will never be any good at maths." And until about 5 years ago, I still believed that.
Yeah.
Even though I have a business degree, I've done a master's, it came to a head the first year of my PhD. I went to a statistics course and went into utter meltdown because suddenly they'd now started mixing letters and numbers, and most of them were in Greek.
Yeah.
And I decided, so I remember going to my supervisor and going, in a right state, going, "That's it, I can't do it. I can't do this PhD. I can't possibly do it." And she said, "Well, why not?" I said, "Because I don't do maths." And she said, "What makes you say that?" And I went, "Because when I was 11, Mr. Ray told me I couldn't do maths." And she said, "And how old are you now?" And I won't tell you what I said, but it certainly wasn't 11. And she said, "What evidence do you have that you don't do maths? You have a business degree. Your bank account is mostly in the black. You are on the right side of the tax man. What on earth makes you think you cannot do maths?" And I had carried that with me all my life because of one comment that somebody said.
And we all have something like that. And I was talking to someone I was coaching the other day, and we talked about it as like carrying around, those kids have these trunky things that are like animals. It's like carrying a trunky from when you're a kid and still taking it on holiday with you when you're a 40-year-old who has moved way beyond where you are. And it's like, you deserve some kind of really fancy carry-on baggage which you're carrying around with you. And you've got this old battered trunky from when you were a kid, and it's still the thing that's driving so many of your behaviors.
Yes. And the narratives that you believe about yourself, are they really true?
Yeah.
And so we need to think about what those narratives are, because those narratives that are not useful will undermine our competence, our sense of control, our belief in our connectedness, our even consistency and our cause. So we need to do an audit on our use on our narratives and get rid of the ones that are not useful.
Kind of call out and get rid of your own BS, isn't it?
Yeah, because it does not serve you when it comes to being psychologically safe. And certainly one of the key two of the key resources that my research found around what you need for psychological safety. One of them was optimism.
Yeah.
And defined as believing that good things will happen. And the other one was hope. Being able to see and plan constructive goals and way forward. And useful narratives are just big boulders on those. Non-useful narratives, are big boulders on that journey.
Yeah, I love that optimism and hope. I often talk about WorkJoy is that it's hopeful. It's not saying I'm definitely going to have all these things that I want, because there's life and things that get in the way. But it's that hope that and that optimism. There is something out there that you can make steps towards. You can make things happen, and that you have some control over that.
And the final part of the sound model is discerning. So one of the resources that has been proven to contribute to psychological safety and, interestingly, resilience, which has different requirements, but the one that was for psychological safety and resilience was actually attentional control. So there is a lot of research around how attentional control can help reduce depression and anxiety and improve mental well-being. And so D is for discerning, being very discerning what you let into your head.
Yeah.
So I don't do a lot of social media, because if I did, I might think that my lips should be much more puffy than they are. And I shouldn't look the way I do, and I should be wearing certain stuff, and they are not helpful. So I take a discerning approach as to what I read and what I let in, and that is being able to control your attention. Now, in the workplace, this is about making a choice. So something happens in the workplace. The example I use in the book is this is based on a real story, whereby they had moved from allocated parking spaces to first come, first served.
Oh, big office politics moment there.
Real corporate stuff here. And now half the people, initially most people who had an allocated parking space were a little bit disgruntled initially. That's okay. But the ones who were low on cognitive resource, for whatever reason, their mind was occupied with other things, or their limbic system was in control, they didn't move beyond that initial disgruntlement because they didn't have enough resource to think it through. They were like, well, this is ridiculous. It's mad, and I should be having this. And then the ego army kicked in about status and all of those things. But if you just thought about it, and those who thought about it, well, actually, we've got a lot more people working from home now. Parking is of a premium. People are also using alternative methods to get to the workplace. So actually, yeah, I can see it probably does make sense. Which one do you choose to let in? Do you choose to let in that, oh, this is ridiculous and look what I've lost? Or do you choose to let in and hold on to, yeah, I can see why this makes sense, really.
Yeah.
And it is a choice. People will say I can't help it. Yes, you can.
Yeah.
If your brain is fit, yes, you can.
And that's the thing about which version of this story are you going for? And everyone's always like, well, what's the version of the truth? It's like, well, there's always like 10 different versions, isn't there? There's the version where it's someone else's fault. There's a version where it's my fault. There's a version where actually it's just a situation. And being able to decide. But I do imagine that takes some ability in your brain, because you have to be in a space where you can understand and look at your own emotions, look at your own reaction, look at the situation, reflect, understand, before you're just kind of going that instant emotional reaction.
Yeah. And the beauty is, you can, with practice, this gets easier, because what we're doing is, whenever thoughts are merely just connections of neurons, and since I've studied neuroscience, a lot of the old belief systems I had about things like personality profiling and all those sort of things, I'm now really questioned, because actually your thoughts and who you are just merely a series of connections of neurons, and they can be changed. In fact, one of the books I'm reading at the moment is about how you do that, how you can not only just change your neurons, but they're also finding you can also change your genes.
Wow.
So if we can change at such a fundamental level, if we have such plasticity in our brain, then you can train it. And I'm not saying it's easy. And this goes back to the basic. If your brain is not fit, and if you are dealing with a big issue at the moment, such as a bereavement, etc., that's not the time to start retraining your brain. There will always be life events which will consume the brain and consume your thoughts. But on a general day-to-day basis, when we have equilibrium, we can choose. We can change the neural pathways.
And the thing is here, isn't it, is that get the basics right first and then go on that journey. Don't try and do that if you haven't got your basics in place.
No.
Great.
Not at all.
Oh.
No, and the caveat is also that what I'm talking about here is Joe average. So if people, this is not about clinical issues. If people have clinical mental issues that are being treated with drugs, etc., that is a different story. Okay, that I'm not saying that this is the stuff that will cure things like bipolar or anything like that. That is not the. This is for your neurotypical brain.
Yeah. It's so fascinating, and I honestly could talk to you for hours and hours more. And I'm going to go and I bought the books. I'm going to go and dive into reading them. But what we can't do is to continue on for hours and hours for our listeners. So what I would love to do now is to dive into some quick fire questions, if that's all right with you. I would love to know, first of all, what is always guaranteed to bring you a little bit of work joy?
Watching people learn and grow, definitely. I love watching the light bulb moment come on, or being able to explain something where they go, oh yeah, I get that, or that's really helpful. That's my little moment of joy and reward.
And really fits in with your purpose as well, doesn't it? So that's a lovely connection there. Love it. Second question, what book are you currently reading?
Well, as of 2 days ago, I was reading The Coddling of the American Mind, which both infuriated me and shocks me and scares me. It's about resilience of the young minds and how we are unwittingly making young people's minds less resilient for the world. But I've just started the Epigenetics Revolution by Nessa Kari, which is what I was referring to about how we can mold our genes.
Ooh, okay, cool. I'm going to have to look those ones up. Question 3. What's the best or most useful bit of advice that you've had in your life that you always find yourself coming back to?
Yes, it was from an ex-boss of mine. And they said, just because you love something or someone doesn't make it good for you.
Ooh.
Yeah. Whether that's chocolate or a friend or a partner, loving it is one thing. Whether it's good for you as who you are is a different thing altogether.
That's a brilliant bit of advice.
It has served me very well when I've had to make some tough decisions.
Yeah, but it's a really good, because it's looking at just because it's amazing. I'm taking that one with me. What is one super practical bit of advice to our listeners that's something that they could go and do now, do tomorrow, do the next day, that would help them in feeling psychologically safe?
I go back to the basics.
Yeah.
Get your 8 hours sleep, do a bit of exercise, drink enough water, that is, in the day, and eat your carbs, the good carbs. So start with the basics, definitely.
Yeah, and build it from where you
Yeah.
get to there. Love it. And also, that's things that everyone can do, right? That none of that stuff is complicated.
Absolutely. And like I say, it's not earth-shattering rocket science. Who look at the big revelation of my research? It's out there, but what I like to think I can do is explain the neuroscience, why we need to sleep and why we need to eat our carbs, and why, give some sort of science behind it, rather than just your parents pointing a nagging finger at you.
Amazing. And then finally, I'm sure that many people want to know, where can people find out more about you and your work?
So I have a website, Dr. as in Dr. Sam Mather. It's the website, and on it there is information there about me, some of the people I work with, the books, and the kind of work that I do and with whom, to help organisations and individuals improve their performance.
Brilliant. And what we'll do is we'll put the website in the show notes when we pop it out there, so that people can link straight through. Sam, it's been amazing chatting with you today. Thank you so much for sharing that high level of your research. I am definitely going to go and learn more about it. I think it's a really interesting concept, thinking about what can you bring yourself in this world of psychological safety. So thank you very much for being a guest on the WorkJoy Jam.
It's a pleasure. Thank you very much, Beth.
I really enjoyed that conversation with Dr. Sam Mather, and we could have gone on, I think, for another couple of hours, but I wanted to keep this conversation in a space that you as the audience could make the most of it. Some really interesting things came out for me. I think the simplicity of the models that she was talking around about being safe and sound are really interesting. Some of those things I think we all, well, I know I did, connected to in that how we feel and how we react and what happens in our emotions, but also this understanding that some of that is controllable. It's not necessarily something we can get rid of, and in fact, would we really want to? Safety is in fact quite important to us, and fearless living isn't necessarily the answer to everything. But how do we understand and manage some of those things within ourselves? How do we create the narratives? Such an important one. I know I have them. That actually, realistically, where are they? Where are we now? Getting rid of some of those old messages we used to tell ourselves, I think, is a great one. And to really use this as a consideration for, as leaders in organisations, when we are leading change, we're not necessarily talking about projects here. We're not talking about IT. We're talking about humans, and how do we help people to feel safe while that change is happening? Help people to work through these things. So some really great advice there from Sam. And do check out her 2 books. We will give you links to her website so that you can find out more and explore a little bit deeper into this world of psychological safety. If you are interested in finding out more about WorkJoy and the things that you can do in your life and in your world to create more joy in it, do come and join Club WorkJoy. We're a really lovely, inclusive, growing community of people who are working together, being inspired by amazing speakers, having conversations and connecting through networking with people in different organisations, and being able to create and cultivate and look at how practically we can really create joy in our working lives. And if you want to go a little bit deeper and a bit more personal, I do have my WorkJoy Way coaching program. It's a 16-week program with experiments, group coaching, and one-to-ones with me. Do check it all out at www.createworkjoy.com. You'll find the links to sign up for Club WorkJoy there, and also to sign up for the WorkJoy Way if you're interested in that. We have a number of episodes across the WorkJoy Jam podcast. Do go and have a listen. I hope you have a really great day. Thank you.